Hey, I'm Duke on Twitch. If you want to support the channel and greensunzenith.com, you can find my Patreon, merch store, and singles store where you can buy singles through TCG Player or Card Hoarder in the video description. If you want to get in contact, you can also find all that info in the description below for things like donation deck lists or just wanting to reach out. Alright, let's get right into it.
Hey, welcome back to Dukes on Twitch. Back today with a bit of a progress piece, thanks to patron That Maverick Joe. This is going to be a bit of a segment looking at Green-White Maverick, going back to the basics of the deck, and over a few leagues, seeing where we want to change things from the pretty basic list that we've created here today. So what I've gone and done is pretty much take a very consistent version of the base of Green-White Maverick. So obviously starting off with 4 Noble Hierarchs, 4 Green Suns, the Dryad Arbor for Green Suns, 3 Once Upon a Times, a fair few 3-ofs, just to make room for some of the 1-ofs that I want, but also Once Upon a Time kind of being a 4th copy of those. So 3 Endurance, 3 Knight, 3 Reclaimer, Thalia, Mum. Cards that I think have been pushed out a little bit by, Orcish Bowmaster hitting obviously Thalia and Mum pretty hard. Endurance I think is quite good. It allows us to have some game against the combo decks in the format that rely on the graveyard, and 3 copies along with Once Upon a Time should really help that in game 1. Reclaimer has come up as a really nice addition to Maverick as just a 1 mana threat that doesn't die to Orcish Bowmasters, and if it untaps, it can be pretty backbreaking for your opponent, so it typically puts a lot of pressure on them to remove the Reclaimers. This version as well, which I'll talk about, does have Flagstones, so we do have ways to ramp with Reclaimer, which is nice, but yeah, I do really like having the extra 1-drop as well. In the Fiend Artisan versions of Abzan, you'll see a lot of 1-drops just to not only have creatures around for Fiend Artisan, but if your little creatures get removed, Fiend Artisan comes down as a 5/5, maybe a 6/6, so that's really cool. So when it came to actual Green Sun's targets, there are a few, but I kept it pretty light. Like, I think Collector Ouphe is still the #1 hate bear in terms of combo matchups. We do have Gadok Teeg in the sideboard for, just having a second piece of hate that can be Green Sunned, but I do think Ouphe does a lot for the deck in either sometimes creating really awkward positions for opponents who are on things like 8-cast or Affinity, which is won a challenge over the weekend. So yeah, Ouphe. I will actually just say on that as well, the Affinity deck plays around Ouphe quite well, because with the 3 mana enchantment that creates constructs whenever you cast, I believe, an artifact spell of 3 CMC or higher, you don't really need to actually use your artifacts unless you have artifact lands or Mox Opals. It's a lot less sort of, baubles and things like that. So although Ouphe is technically good against Affinity, I could see a lot of worlds where you're just chumping with Ouphe a few turns after you play it, because they do get big very quickly with that deck. But overall, I think that Collector Ouphe is still great in a format with LED, Lotus Petal, Mox Time to some extent. And Liberator, I think just having a main deck way to remove an artifact or enchantment is really strong. Obviously, Liberator flips, which is great as well, so it can give you some ongoing value and pressure, potentially be more than just a 1-for-1 trade. So I think when it comes to a Green Suns build, other than Dryad Arbor, these are probably 2 of the cards that I'm putting in the main deck first. We then do have a few others. So Scryb Ranger I really like, not only because we're running a Mother of Runes version, but we also have Lush Portico as Savannah #3, which I think is a pretty easy switch out, because it does give you obviously some advantage of controlling the top of the deck. With Scryb Ranger, you have a small engine for it, which is nice. It's still in a forest and a plains for another Reliquary. And yeah, overall, I think I'm just pretty happy with that sort of mana base. So the 2 Savannahs, the Lush, the 2 Forests, and the Plains. I did have a second Plains to have 4 basics, but I have had a few moments where the second Plains can be a little bit awkward, especially for a deck that doesn't need it other than double spelling through a Blood Moon. So no cards like Sanctum Prelate or Baneslayer Angel, which has seen play on this channel, and actually trophied on this channel, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with the 6 fetches and then 6 cards to grab from it, plus Dryad Arbor. So, and then the classic 4 Wastelands, the Canopy for when you want it. Obviously with Bowmaster, it's a little bit awkward at times. Against Delver in the opening, it can be a little bit awkward as well. Obviously dealing you with damage each time you want to use it, but generally I think it's nice to have a land in the deck that can potentially be turned into a land down the line, or a spell I should say. We do also have Tireless Tracker, which is pretty old tech, but I think in a basic build of Mav like this, I really like it because it's another threat. If we do start just drawing into lands, it is a decent Green Suns target to go for that can give you some advantage without having to untap, unlike Knight or Reclaimer. Being able to play Tireless and then play a fetch land, potentially get 2 clues is pretty great. Bowmaster is a little bit awkward against any sort of draw, but I do like that with clues you get to activate them at instant speed when you want. So it's not like a sorcery speed thing where yeah, having them on the field I think is relevant. A little bit of an oboe with Ouphe, but a lot of the time if you have Ouphe out and Tracker against the deck where Ouphe is good, you're probably in a great position anyway. But yeah, I do like having kind of another version of Knight in the sense that it's a big threat. Ramunap as well is kind of where I took out the extra Reclaimer and Knight to fit in these two, as they're in pretty similar positions. I do like that Ramunap can get back a land each turn. I did have Renegade Rallier in the list, but because we are playing the stage and depths, I do like ways to get back both. Obviously with Renegade Rallier, you can get back one piece, and then you have to say endurance yourself to then be able to search up the other piece. So at least Ramunap does give you that ability to potentially play both stage and depths from the bin after you've gone for it and potentially had the Merit Liege answered. But in saying that, we are running the stage and depths package. That's mainly because we are running the Reclaimer package to some extent, but also I just wanted to have a sort of, hey, we can actually just win from here button, or an I win button. Because I think that when it comes to Green-White, you are obviously very fair. No Bowmasters, no Fourth Aerolingus, no Pyroblast, no Minsk and Boo, although that's seen a little bit of a drop off. No, Fable or Thoughtseize or Grist. So you are running on the basics of what Maverick provides, which I don't think is a bad thing either. I think you can play a really strong, consistent game with Green-White. And we've seen that from players like Clips for Life, who's done really well with it. And I think with Green-White, obviously you get a bit of flex as well. So here we are running Bojuka Bog, the Depths package of Flagstones, a few more Green Suns targets like the Tracker, like the Scryb Ranger. You could be running Urza Saga with Shadow Spear. You could be running alongside that Stoneforge Mystic with Jide and sort of Fire and Ice. If you went up on Protection, you could potentially even run Batterskull or Cauldra, which in my experience have just kind of rotted in your hand if you don't have sort of turn 1 Mummer to turn 2 Stoneforge. But yeah, I really like that with Green-White, you can kind of find the flex spots, which I kind of put down as a 6 as to what you want to build. Obviously the Reclaimers as well, you could pretty much put over here, the Tireless Tracker. So nearly 10 cards, you could say, what I would call non-stock to some extent. Everything else I'd be pretty happy to have in any copy of Green-White Mav going forward. But obviously, again, check out the Green-White Maverick Discord with Clips's lists and a few other players who've done really well with the deck, and also built out. We're obviously at stage 1, so I want to play this for a league. I want to see how it performs, see what cards actually did pretty well, which cards didn't. Potentially even do 2 leagues per assessment. I think that's like 5 games isn't that much. 10 games is fair. So yeah, what I really wanted to do was have a really nice consistent deck, and I think this is what is going to be provided via this list. Consistency. The board as well, a lot of 2-ofs. Sometimes I really like just 3-ofs. Kind of go for the 5 of like combo, graveyard, artifact and enchantment, creature hate, and then 3 kind of flex. And we've kind of gone with like a fair bit of combo hate because obviously Green-White. So the Deafening Silences, the Veils are quite nice as well. Veil against the Scam decks is really strong. And having the Veils against things like Grief or Bowmasters is obviously pretty sweet. Having the paths, I don't mind. Dismember does hit a lot of things, but we also don't have too much removal when it comes to a deck like Delver. So taking the 4 damage early on can definitely add up. And Path is pretty interesting because Path does give them a basic, but against a lot of the decks that you play against that know you're running Wasteland, typically go for basics early on. So sometimes by the time you path them, even if that's on turn 3, they already have their 1 or 2 basics in play. So Path can sometimes just be a better Swords to Plowshares. I really like switching them out as well. So 2 Path in, 2 Swords out against lands, which I typically find I don't need swords that much. We do have a lot of answers to Maritlage. You don't often want to be swordsing or pathing constructs. You want to be dealing with them through Wasteland or Force of Vigor. So Path is a really nice way because against these sort of decks, you're wanting to obviously win through combat, and giving your opponent 20 life is pretty brutal. So Path there is typically pretty nice. And I find lands generally goes for their basic forest pretty early on, just to make sure they're going to be on a stable mana base against a deck that does like to tax. I have seen versions with, say, Solitude, which is also a great way to get rid of extra versions of Thalia. But with Reanimate in the format, I've been blown out a few too many times by my own Solitude. So again, Path I think is just really strong. Doorkeeper Thrall does help against the other value decks, which is really nice. Obviously any sort of like Thassa's Oracle deck I like. Choke I think is fine. I was thinking of Carpet of Flowers, but having the 2 forests in the plains, so the full 3 basics and no need for a 3rd color, I feel okay against Delver in terms of how we want to manage our mana. Force of Vigor I think could be a 3 of. It's just hard finding the space for it, but I feel like Force of Vigor and Endurance are kind of our Force of Wills for the format. And a lot of the decks where you might have something like Pick Your Poison, it's just a little bit either too slow or giving your opponent the choice doesn't lead to the best outcome for you. So Force of Vigor, knowing that I'm dealing with Ensnaring Bridge and Painter, or dealing with Urza Saga and Exploration, puts you in a pretty nice spot because you don't have a great way of controlling what your opponent can cast. Obviously no counter magic. We don't have Ponders and Brainstorms to go and find the removal we need, so I feel like you need to be direct with your removal. And Pick Your Poison, at least in my experience, just hasn't really stepped up to where I think it should be in terms of legacy playability. Has a lot of text, has a lot of options, but there's been times where I've wanted to deal with a Murktide and they just had a flip Delver, or they've had the Saga and I wanted to get rid of the Exploration. Small things like that. And against decks like Affinity, which are popping up, where they're getting these large constructs, but also playing things like Affinity lands or Artifact lands, there's going to be choices where your opponent comes out with, what's best for me, not, oh, damn, this is going to be really good for my opponent if they get rid of this. So, yeah, I'm pretty keen to see how all this plays out. I think when it comes to Green-White, the mana base of like the extra basic, even though it's a small thing, is quite nice. Not having to go for a 3rd color is always really cool. Ooze as well. Ooze is an interesting one because I think it's really popped up in the last few months as just being a great Green Suns target again. A lot of decks do rely on single targets in their graveyard, so things like Loam, getting back a Grief or a Troll. Even turning off Delirium has been pretty sweet. It doesn't deal with graveyards against, like, say, Dredge or potentially, a Murktide deck as well as Endurance, but it still has its spots. And I think being able to have some control over that is pretty awesome. Even the other Knight and Reclaimer decks, it's really nice to be able to control how big their threats are, how much they can use their graveyard as a resource in terms of getting cards back. So, yeah, I think that Ooze has kind of oozed its way back into the list, but that joke was not great. I think the last one is like Doorkeeper Thrall. Like, we did talk about it a little bit, but yeah, I think it just does provide a nice way to fight against the other Stoneforge decks, the other, like D&T. I think Doorkeeper's pretty sweet, especially with Mother of Runes there. Turning off Solitude as well is pretty good. You know, swords being the only real out to Thrall that I'm thinking of. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this. I'm going to really enjoy going into the league. I think there will be a few cards that I'll look at and just be like, hey, what if this was a version? You know, how many times did we draw Tireless Tracker and we wanted it to be the extra copy of Knight? Or when would Ramunap be better as a Renegade Rallier? Like, are there combo decks that are dealing with Ouphe with like Abrupt Decay that you want to get back from the yard? And, you know, therefore want to have something like a Renegade Rallier in the list. So, cool. That's it. This will be a standalone deck tech. We'll go through the league this week. I am away for the next few weeks for work and Magic as well, so I'll try to get this done as soon as possible. But yeah, I really appreciate Joe for the challenge, and then also just the Green-White Maverick community. I think it's very easy these days to fall into the I'll just splash a color and, you know, we'll go absent or puns. So to actually stick with Green-White and be like, you know what, we're going to tune Green-White and make it just as good. That's very cool, and I appreciate that part of the community. So see you soon. Hey, welcome back to round one. We have a pretty interesting first hand. So we have a pretty much a one lander with acceleration. We have two other 1 mana plays. Dryad Arbor, of course, a land that comes in with summoning sickness, which is a little bit rough. We don't have a great way to remove threats at the moment. And looking at the list, we do obviously have things like Turn 1 Mum, we have Once Upon a Time, Thalia. So I could see a world where I find Wasteland is actually quite strong right now in the metagame. And this hand just isn't that great. It's a little bit awkward. So I'm going to mulligan this. Actually pretty happy with this. So it is, again, probably going to be a one-lander. We can bottom the Bog. But we have the Once Upon a Time. The Collector Ouphe is still here. I could even bottom the Ouphe, to be fair, as it's kind of the Green Sun's target that might be good, might not be good. And potentially just having the Bog is good enough. Put a Delta into Volk, most likely meaning some sort of Delver. So having the Bog here is quite nice, just to probably play later on in the match to try to keep a Murktide out of the field, keep the DRCs down to 1/1s. I think we did draw Depths. So I think I am going to play the Forest first and then the Once. We can't find Mother of Runes and play it, so this plays around Days to some extent. Of course, they could, if they want, get rid of this. I think here I actually just love the Windswept Heath. And honestly, I probably don't mind Green Suns. I want a Green Suns here for a few things. I want to get more mana in play. If they have a Daze, I want to, you know, get Daze out of the hand before we cast the Endurance. If they have a Bolt on the Arbor, then it's probably a good turn on our next turn just to play the Bog and pass. The Windswept could get a Plains, but there are still games where you might go after your basics early on to play around Wasteland, but that can hit your mana pretty hard, because if we get a Plains here, we can't actually cast the Endurance of the lands we have. I think if I drew Thalia, I would play the Windswept for Plains, but that's pretty nice as well. I mean, we're in no rush to play the Bog. They're also on one land, so I think I'm happy just to go for Verdant here. Let's have a quick think. So they're missing land drops. So if they're wastelanding us, they're still on one land a turn. So we could go Savannah, Savannah. We could also go Lush and get a Surveil, which is quite nice. So I think I actually will go with the Verdant into Lush, because this can get both basics. the Verdant can only get basic forest, so I like keeping options open here as well. They also kept on top of the bolt, so yeah, I was going to assume potentially another. Stifle would be a little bit awkward, which is seeing play in some Delver builds. But I'm happy to see if that's the go or not. All right. Removal would be great. Hierarch. Okay. So Hierarch does a few things. It allows us to play Bog next turn, play Hierarch around days. I probably don't want to just throw the Endurance into a daze, so I actually like this as a play for next turn, so I will put this on top. Play it off the forest. Play Bog. Pass. And that gives us a bit of time to play around Murktide, which is nice. Because I think we've come to a point in the game where I'm happy to play around days as much as possible. But you can see while these are 1/1s, like this would be a great time to have like an Orcish Bowmaster, potentially Punishing Fire, even Bolt. Having those extra splashes in the deck and giving you more access to removal is obviously pretty strong. But you can see as well how quickly they can get access to Delirium again, which is kind of scary. But Depths does give us kind of an unfair way to win this game, which is nice, especially if we can find, say, Green Suns for Night, or the stage itself. I think it's really important to have something like this in Green-White, whether that's Depths, Saga, Stoneforge Mystic. And there's Delirium. Wow. So here, I mean, one Force in hand would be great for them. Takes the Endurance off the field. I'm not sure if that would keep double days. There's a world where I'd like to go Dark Depths next turn and then play the Endurance, being able to pay 1 around the days. Delver as well. Okay. Blast Zone, I wouldn't be too bad here. It'd be a 2 for 3. Cradle. Yeah, let's go Sorcery, Speed, Endurance. And then I can actually play the Ramunap here as well. So just because the Cradle was the play, I'm happy to get this down. Wow, so no days on that either. That's really interesting. So they know the flip, and there's the days. They didn't keep the days. That's, yeah. Okay. They're probably going to bolt the Excavator here, and then put the days into the bin. Important. Okay. Just insane as well. like just the power of Delver, how we were able to bog. The following turn they had Delirium online, and then even this turn, after endurancing them, they could just have Murktide this turn as a 6/6, a 7/7 if they have an instant as well. What are they bolting? Are they bolting me? Okay. That can really only mean that they have Murktide, or potentially a bounce spell on the endurance. Okay. Needs to be really good. Sadly, that's not it. But we can play the Depths. The Depths doesn't change sideboarding, in my opinion. And having 2 cards, they might think of, you know, crop rotation potentially. So we have to block the Murktide. We take 5. Interesting. But from here, I don't believe we have a great out, other than drawing into stage. Wasteland. All right. We obviously like the Path to Exiles. I like the Chokes on the play and the Veils. Not a big fan of the Ouphe or the Liberator. Tracker, a little bit slow as well. Same with Knight. I'd much rather just have Endurance as my 3-drop. I don't mind the Reclaimers. I don't mind the Thalias, especially in the non-Grixis builds. Choke's a little bit tougher in green-white, especially because we have less ways to control the board. I'm not a big fan of choking when they have threats in play. And by threats, I mean multiple threats, because it can just be a bit of a time walk situation. I could go down on depths as well, but with it only being a one of, it's not too bad. I do like the mana acceleration. I mean, if this is eating a bolt, if this is eating a daze, if it's not to all 3, great kind of outcomes. The Veils are like a fine. I have to have the mana up, which I usually do if I'm playing around days, but you know, if they force pitch days and have a mana up, it's quite nice to have the Veil, but it can be a little bit awkward to be able to hold up the Veil at the same time, and can potentially put you in positions where you actually just don't or can't afford to wait. It might actually be the Veils. I don't think they're strong enough here. This really relies on the Once Upon a Time finding a land, which I am happy to take that risk. Turn 1 Mum, turn 2 Thalia, turn 3 Knight or Endurance seems really strong. And, you know, the numbers behind the Once Finding a White Source are pretty high. But risky, I will say that. Opponent keeps 7. Can't do that. Let's do this first. Very lucky. And that's where, like, the once hands can be a little bit awkward. But it also allowed me to keep this hand with it, which I think is fairly strong. Cradle can be a little bit tough here as well, because they're probably going to be trying to remove our creatures as soon as possible. Wow. A second mum. I actually don't mind playing second mum here. But Thalia is interesting. Thalia plays obviously into days, but putting them behind as well is quite nice. So I don't mind jamming Thalia here. But there is the argument that mum is only, you know, only going to get better the earlier you get her down, because it's less time for your opponent to find a piece of removal. Wasteland's fine. So they can't daze here, which is really nice for us. So I think at this stage we're happy to attack with the Thalia and then just play the Endurance. But now I think we're in a really nice spot. Ponder for 2 is fine. We can start getting pretty aggressive next turn as well, I feel. Lush in this instance, if we untap and don't find a white source, is just a little bit worse. Probably just a good thing to note is these sort of situations, because they do come up. A second white source I'll definitely keep as well. Yes. I wonder if they play some sort of sweeper. And if so, what? The land being a fetch land is also quite good because it turns the knight into a 4/4, which means playing that knight gets around a lightning bolt as well. Just a small thing, but I tapped the Cradle there. They didn't play the Wasteland first to act like I have Endurance. Really, like, tacky, but I think it's pretty funny that they didn't attack. And honestly, at this stage, I'm happy just to play another mum and hold up path. I could path now while it can't be countered, but Yeah, I feel like this is a really good showing of how Mav can do really well even without removal against Delver. You just have to keep applying pressure and making some pretty big choices. Like, you know, we kept a Once Upon a Time hand that had to find a white source. We played the turn 2 Thalia into Days instead of being a little bit safer and playing the mum. And I think that all paid off. Okay. I don't mind bringing in one Veil for one Choke. I'm not a big fan of Choke on the draw, but in saying that as well, we do bring a little bit more removal in. So I think I'm okay just running this back. And I like knowing that we have one of each in the deck. But, you know, 3 lands, 4 spells with one of those spells being removal is kind of where I want to be on the draw. Make sure your mana's going to be good. Make sure you have a plan with how you're going to build out your board, but also have something to, you know, control what your opponent's doing to some extent. So like, yeah, like there we are, pretty close to it. I mean, that actually is it. Like 3 spells, 4 land, other way around, but pretty happy with this, honestly. Especially with the Wasteland as well. Probably happy to go, see what the turn 1 is, but I'm typically a big fan of Wasteland dead turn 1 play no matter what, but it also depends on what you have. And being on the draw is a little bit different. So if they go turn 1 Ponder, then I'm very happy to Wasteland. Turn 1 DRC, probably not. Turn 1 Delver, a little more likely to. Okay, well, now that's all off the charts. We really want to spell off the top, especially with this amount of mana already in play. But the basic island's already in play, so potentially, the path isn't great here. I could also start with once, played into Days, but then played the turn 1 Mum, and not allow that to get dazed, make them have to have a red source and a removal spell for the Mum, which I don't mind. Okay. Let's have a quick look. I think here it's just going to be the Mum. And then turn 1 Mum. Next turn we're able to Mum and Noble potentially. I think the best brainstorm here would be reveal Bolt, flip the Delver, play a red source, bolt the Mum. Lightning Bolt, flip Delver. All right. Red source, nice. They're on 3 cards. So there's even a world here. I think I'm happy to double spell here. Mum around Days and then play the Noble. Just get more white sources in play. I would love to see a fetch into Murktide this turn. All right, they're on 1 card. I think in this one, I'm happy to take them off the red source. instant land artifact. Now we have path open around days. And there's the ponder. So I think here in combat we'll take out the DRC as a 3/3, as it has that extra value. Take the 3, go to 11. Still have a path open, which is nice. Green Suns for Scryb Ranger would be really nice. Bojuka Bog as well. Chose to not shuffle. Which maybe the path changes up a bit. Maybe the shuffle is good for us. Wow, they're going to force it pitching a Murktide. It's kind of nice for us. They're down to 1 card. Puts Wasteland into the bin. We take 6. That isn't too bad. It allows us to draw at the end of their turn. So upkeep, I'm happy just to hit this. No land left. Okay. All right. Not great. Tough. Put that on top. Play a Noble. Attack with Hierarch. So we have a few options at 3. I think Endurance is going to be the play. But there are some small things. There's like Ooze. There's a creature. There's only 1 creature though. So Ooze doesn't do it. But going to 2 is pretty scary. And they have 3 cards. Quick look. So Endurance actually also takes Murktide off the field, which is nice. But there's the Force. Tough. I think it's a pretty good showing though of the Delver matchup without extra removal. Like obviously Bolt or Bowmaster and etc. And probably a little bit expected, but I think there's also a fight if you do draw, you know, your removal side of the deck. So no Library is going to cause that a little bit, and a few other cards, but Not the start we wanted, but we'll come back. Hey team, welcome back. Here we have a pretty land-heavy start with Dryad Arbor as well, so no way to move ahead with Green Suns, but with the Reclaimer, I don't mind it. It really relies on the Reclaimer though, so being a 5-land hand, stage is kind of a spell, but I think I'm pretty happy to mulligan this towards something with like, yeah, this is exactly what I want. So let's keep this, probably bottom the Knight as the Green Suns target, just in case we're up against combo. I want to keep the Green Suns for something like a turn 2 Ouphe. And then with this sort of opening, I'm pretty happy just to go for basic plains. Sorry, basic forest. But this is a great hand against Delver if it was Delver. But just an island into Brainstorm. Doesn't give too much away. Next turn's pretty key as well. Like if it is combo, we want to go for that Collector Ouphe as soon as possible. The island makes me feel like they know about Wasteland, and so they're a little bit sketchy on mana. But this could also be elves to some extent from our opponent's perspective, which doesn't typically run Wasteland. Savannah. Okay. Stoneforge. Nice. Probably Caldra. Yeah. Which is a tough one. I could play Scryb and then get some untapped stuff going, but I kind of like just trying to deal with this first. Could do it in their upkeep to play around Force Negation in the main deck. But I also kind of like just getting Reclaimer down here as well. And we get a pass. This mana base, wow. 4 color so far. Obviously great for Wasteland. So very happy to be running the full for Wasteland, Reclaimer, Knight, etc. I think next turn we're just going to be holding up Reclaimer, attacking with Scryb for 2, passing. Another Stoneforge for them would be great. Get that Caldra back online is just a really nice sort of beatdown plan. Which is pretty much a 5-turn clock for this deck. Binding. Okay. That's fine. In that case, I like... We haven't played a land yet. So we can get Outland Liberator, untap Noble, return the land, play Mum, and then hold up Liberator on the Leyline Binding. Liberator, untap, return. Actually, we just played the forest, didn't we? Yeah, that's on me. I think in that case, I'm just going to hold up the Liberator and not play the Mum. I'd hate to lose the Liberator without actually getting some sort of use out of it. Hmm. Now this is tough. Maybe the line here now is actually just getting back Reclaimer and trying to move towards depths as a win. Now they have another binding. So we can attack with the Scryb. 3. The Batterskull is going to be tough because the Cauldra will just fly or just trample over with lifelink, so we might not even have the time to set up Dark Depths. Maybe with Exalted, but it's pretty tricky. Shadow Spear off Saga is a nice way to deal with Cauldra, if you do have a way to actually pip it as well. There's a world where we can Endurance ourselves to put the Outland Liberator back in the deck, but they also have the mana just to put in Batterskull and then return it as well. Wasteland's also a little bit too slow here. That is a Lush, which gives us a Scry, but it's not looking great. Maze of Ith would be kind of cool in Green-White as kind of a removal spell. Just kind of tough that a lot of the creature decks do play actual removal. And I think we're actually targeting ourselves here. Get back the Sword and the Outland Liberator. 2 great outs for the Batterskull. Get the Lush to get an extra little check. Put that in the graveyard. Yeah. Tough. think we just can't beat the germ with the... Yeah. I like these. I like the Thralls because they actually stop the ETB effects of the Batterskull and Cauldra. Collector Ouphe. Tracker, I don't mind. The Endurances can probably be cut. Reclaimer's fine. I wonder if they're playing something in the graveyard. I don't mind the paths. It's really awkward because you don't typically want to bring in path. You just want to have a great answer to Stoneforge, but path, I guess, will be fine here. The Teague is interesting as well. It does stop leyline binding, does stop like force, but I wouldn't consider that. But even like Supreme Verdict, something like that. I don't mind going down on mana acceleration. Thalia is still fine. Ooze is a just in case. Can probably bottom the bog in that case. It could just be the onces. Onces allow us to dig. Could also just be the one path. And then just keep a once. Really unsure about sideboarding here. It's one of those hands where it's just a little bit too like obviously just green mana, 2 swords is really tough, so pretty happy to mulligan this. Oof. Yeah. Can be a little bit too reactive once you board, especially with like multiple swords, but if their main way to win is Stoneforge, you do want to have at least one removal spell. Alright. I think it's Veil and Knight. And try to go for turn 1 Mum, turn 2 Teague. I think the only way I'd stop a turn 2 Teague is potentially if they go for a dual land turn 1. Just to slow down Stoneforge as well. Okay. Does protect the Teague, which is nice. Wonder if they're thinking if I don't force this, then I'm not going to be able to force anything until I find removal that isn't prismatic, isn't leyline binding. Cauldra. Yeah. So we can play Thalia, but now we're on a race against having to deal with the Cauldron. There's a world where you shouldn't attack here because you want to hold back the Stoneforge just to keep the mana base, or the lifelink, sorry, at a higher level, but I think here just a little bit too strong. Yeah. GG. Tough. Well, definitely not the start we wanted, but we'll try to come back in the third game. Cheers. Hey team, on the play, which is nice, with pretty decent hand if we can find another land through the once, so very happy to keep this. Turn 1, Dryad Arbor, it a turn 2 creature. Always nice to see a fan in the chat as well. All right. So we're setting up pretty nicely. We have a turn 2 Scooze with the mana open. We have Endurance open next turn. Swords attack. Bolt. Okay. Painter. So here I'm probably happy just to play the Ooze out, as it doesn't tax the sword. Thalia attacking the sword is a little bit rough. We also have the Endurance open if needed. Hopefully not. Soul Cauldron. Okay. Didn't attack, which is pretty interesting. This is actually a tough spot because I don't really want to deal with this because I don't have an answer through Ooze currently. I also want to try to build out my mana somewhat, but I don't want to tap out. I think in this case I'm happy to attack, see if they block. And if they do, we can just Endurance. I think for what we have in play, or what we have in hand, I'm probably not getting to a stage where I can actually use the Endurance and the Green Suns before I'm casting the Thalia or the swords here. So this is fine. They then try to play a Mox, but we have the Blast, or the swords for this, which is nice. Also turning off Metalcraft. Unless their last 2 cards were going to be Spirit Guide and also Blast. But land here is pretty needed. Landed into Green Suns for Ouphe? No. I still think we play the Thalia route, even though it does hit us. Mm. Cradle be a fantastic draw. I really want to find that extra land for the Green Suns. I think if we find land next turn, I attack with the Thalia. Just so we can get the Ouphe into play. Okay. Yeah, it's not worth eating anything here. Not the land we want. Oh, I can go and get Cradle next turn though, which allows us just to Green Suns the following turn, which is nice. Saga's pretty good. That might also mean I just want to go for... I think it is Cradle still. Let's have a quick think. I think Ouphe is best here. It is tough though. I think Ouphe this turn, and then next turn we can go against something as well. Maybe the Outland Liberator. But I can't let them get 2 Saga triggers. I don't want to attack and use the mum because of things like blast and bolt. I'm just going to deal with this now. Okay. They have one card left. I'm not going to do anything just yet. I do have Scryb Ranger of the other Green Suns. Swords is pretty decent. I'm not going to running Renegade Rallier, which I think I should be. But Scryb Ranger being pro blue is kind of nice. All right. Let's turn the Canopy into a Lush. Oh, I could also go for Stage into Depths. I think that's just the best line. Yeah. Could play the mum, it's kind of free. They have one card. Saga's fine. I think we just get rid of the Savannah. Get Depths. Okay. Very fortunate. Very fortunate. I like the Force of Vigors. I don't mind the extra parts. Doorkeeper's interesting, like Surgical's interesting. Just to be able to take them off one half of the game plan. Thalia is not the greatest here. The track is a little bit slow. Quick think. I think that's going to be it. I don't really want to be in a surgical game. Just a really poor top deck. One mana. So we have multiple ways to build out, but I think against their fast starts it can just be a little bit rough. Nothing really against the Saga plane either, so this is better. Happy to keep this bottom of night. Oh, yeah, bottom of night. There we go. Savannah Noble. A little bit scary. But we do get to Endurance at just sorcery speed next turn. We can even play the... I probably don't want to play the Wasteland. Yeah. Insurance you. I could try to wait for them, but I think this is okay. This is probably the reason to wait. Yeah. I think I want to play the Knight, but hold up Wasteland to be able to Wasteland myself to save it from Bolt, more than play out the Mum or the Liberator. I guess I could Mum and Liberator and hold up Liberator, but with the Engineers, it's a little bit tough. Maybe on Green-White it is a surgical game, sadly. Just have to have more interaction when you're tapped out and building out your board. No, I think if I'm going to win this game, it's going to be through Dark Depths. Yeah. So I kind of have to save the Knight here. They're down to 0 cards. They get back the Dragon. Draw 3. No great attacks here, so we'll let this pass. So here we get to hold up Knight. Okay. Happy just to put the Endurance in front of this. Do we still have the Bog? Yes. But they do have 2 ways to get it back as well. I guess they have no artifacts left to sack. So this might just work. Okay. And we get to hold up sword if needed. They can have that. Okay. Also just going to copy Canopy here. Get an extra color. Reclaimer. I want the 2 mana 4 depths. So here we're just going to pass back. Now they have 2 cards left. If they cast Painter, we should respond so they can't blast stage in response. We actually don't have a land to sack. That's really awkward. That's really awkward. I didn't even think of that. Yeah. Brutal. We just time walked ourselves. Huh. That kind of changes things. So with the trigger on the stack, we can make it. I wonder if they have a way to put an artifact into the yard to be able to like get rid of the bridge in response to us blowing it up. Actually, that won't work. We need to get rid of something else as well. Always keep an eye on the lands you have for sure. Yeah. I guess we can draw to endurance and go off that way. I don't think we have a great out here because they have the pedal. So even if we like, I guess we don't even have the mana for Liberator. So like we can hold up sword, but yeah, there's no great way to do it. We'll bring in the surgicals. I don't think it's great, but we'll see how it slides. It could just be some mana acceleration. Even like a Reclaimer I don't mind a Reclaimer, but I actually like the Mana Acceleration. I think it's tough, especially if they have board wipes. Maybe not. Maybe this. But yeah, the time walk there on ourselves was brutal, and that's just an error by me by thinking the canopy could be sacked. Small things add up. Happy to keep this. Have access to swords turn 1, have access to force. I'm happy to allow that. Ancient Tomb. Okay. I'm not in a big hurry that I'm happy just to allow those. If I can get to hardcast force, I'd be very happy. Wonder if they grindstone themselves here. Lava Spa and Fable. Another grindstone. Okay. Painter. 1 mana. I think we're fine with this. Just having a quick think. I have 2 cards left. I might just want to get rid of the grindstones. So like, they have 2 cards. I'm kind of scared about like a blast effect, which we do have swords for. So I think I actually will just allow this. So what if I try to force now pitching endurance? Force these two. If they blast, we then have... I could also force... Yeah, I think what I'm happy to do is force these two. And then if they try to welder the painter away, we then have swords on painter. Get rid of endurance. We have the ooze. The reason I don't like force on the painter is that if I want to swords in response to Reb, I'm hitting the painter anyway. Now they probably want a welder before we get access to ooze. So if they target painter, we swords the other welder, and then we surgical painter. So they're going to try to get back painter. Ah, but they also have the cauldron. So what if I swords, and then in response to this, we eat, and then in response to this, we try to surgical. Now they try to eat as well. So now we try to eat painter. See if they'll cauldron. They don't. Okay. Pretty happy with this either way. Now we have Ouphe. Ah, sorry. For some reason, I thought we had a swords in hand still, and I kept the white mana open. I should have just gone for it and also played the Reclaimer out this turn as well. That was a mistake. Yeah, because now we don't have the mana up for Ooze either. Yikes. All right, now we really got to think about our plays. Okay. This I'm pretty happy to do, yeah, like this. Don't mind Wasteland, but we also get, they have 2 cards in hand, so I get to attack with the Ouphe, thanks to Exalted. Now they have to block with the Welder or go down to 1. Wow. Which turns off the Tomb, which is great. And now I'm pretty happy to play Reclaimer, and then hold up Ooze plus Surgical. We also have attack with like Reclaimer, then Wasteland ourselves to grow it. Yeah, nice. All right. Well, we get there, which is nice. Finally get on the board. Which, it did feel yeah, it felt underpowered, and I'm not sure, like, no grist, like I'm just so used to other colors that it's getting a little bit tough to adjust within just, you know, one league, but we'll see how this one goes. Hey team, welcome back. We're on the play with a pretty great hand. Turn 1 Noble, turn 2 Knight, turn 3 Tracker, get some clues. Pretty happy to keep this. We also have swords for interaction, which is great. Honestly, pretty happy just to lead off with the forest. Small things here is like, it doesn't mean we can like draw into Wasteland if they remove the Noble. We can't draw into Wasteland, also hold up sword at the same time. So small opportunity cost, but we'll see how that pans out. Ooh. Well, this looks to be Reanimator, I assume, or just a hardcast Grief. That's actually not that bad. I mean, they take 1 card off us, but they've used 1, 2, 3 for the Grief. All right, let's go for Knight here. Knight just a little bit more impactful, I think. Pretty big cost as well for them. So we'll see what their follow-up is. We can also just 6 right now. Nothing. Wow. That's pretty great. We actually get to play both of these, which is pretty nice. So let's start off with Tracker. Get rid of this. Get a fetch land. Trigger Tireless Tracker. Fetch for another Savannah. Trigger. Play the Karakas. Trigger. And then play the Knight. That's a pretty nice turn 3. Now I also have access to... I could have got Cradle there if I wanted to. Cradle next turn's quite nice as well with the clue. But you can see there how quick it was with the Knight. And obviously, like Tireless Tracker there, like pretty much a draw 3 on turn 3. Pretty cool. But let's be honest here. Our opponent did not have a great start. This deck that they're playing is most likely going to be Reanimator, which, you know, a hard cast Grief on turn 1 probably doesn't cut it. And no follow-up play is also pretty tough. So happy to grab that first game. So obviously Surgical's pretty good. Veil is also quite nice at usually protecting your hand from things like Grief. I do like the Path to Exiles. Force of Vigors are always interesting against a deck like Reanimator. Typically you're looking at Animate Dead as the main culprit, but I think we can do without it. Tracker there was quite good, but typically it's just a little bit too grindy for this match. Deafening Silence I don't mind, but I will bring in on the play if that comes up, probably not the draw. Endurance is nice. Ramunap again in that sort of grindy area. Ouphe's okay, but it really only hits Lotus Petal, so pretty happy to look at moving that as well. The Reclaimers are quite nice because they do have access to Bojuka Bog on turn 2. The Mums I could see coming out. Thalia's on the draw aren't great, but again, if we are taxing them in other ways, they do add up. It could just be a Noble Hierarch. Like a turn 1 Noble tapped out isn't the greatest play, so it's probably something like this. I think the Ouphe hitting Petal is just enough. I think it does a little bit more than everything else. Mum does give protection, but I think if your opponent has the creature in play, then it's going to be a tough time. What we're trying to do post-board is really keep creatures from coming into play, and of course if they do, remove them with things like Path and Sword. Don't get a stage where, you know, having Mum in combat is relevant for this match. All right, so here what we have is a turn 1 Noble Hierarch, turn 2 Ooze, with most likely mana up. So on the draw, this is turn 3 Graveyard Interaction. Not great. So I'm going to mulligan this hand. I think in the blind, I'll definitely keep this. Potentially against Scaminator, I wouldn't mind it. If this Ouphe was a removal spell, It's probably the big thing. So goodbye. These sometimes come up. We'll say goodbye to this. And we're kind of back to the first hand, so I think we are going to keep this. Now, I do like how this hand plays out, that we have Reclaimer for Graveyard Hate. We do have Ooze for Graveyard Hate as well. We also have the Green Sun Zenith. I could see a world where we just bottom the Ooze, as it's a Green Sun's target, but that is like one turn more. So if they go turn 1 pass, it's most likely, say, in Entomb line, where turn 2 they reanimate, which this hand currently has nothing for. It has to be Once Upon a Time into Endurance. The Ooze might just be a bit too slow here, so I'm going to bottom that. And then I think here, I think it's a little bit greedy to bottom the land, but with the hand we have access to a lot of mana, which is nice. Because what are we really looking for with the once? It's probably Endurance if we're firing it off on their first turn. I think it might just be the Noble, because Noble's great for like turn 1 Noble, turn 2 3-drop, but having the Reclaimer gives us a really nice way to play out turn 1. And if the Once Upon a Time finds a Noble Hierarch, I'm pretty happy for that as well. So I think we'll actually bottom the Noble here. Make sure we have 2 lands, and then have a nice 1-drop in Reclaimer, and hopefully some interaction off the once if that comes up. All right, Sire of Insanity and Atraxa. All right, so they're going for the Sire line. So this once has to hit Endurance. It does. Wow. Bang. So here we get to go this minus this, Endurance them, and then we have the Reclaimer as a turn 1 play. Opponent with some nice little caps. Now this is actually pretty interesting. I think playing the Reclaimer here is better because it turns on turn 2 Bojuka Bog, and just getting it into play is where I want to be. All right, another looting. Harvester of Misery. Interesting. So thankfully that's one that we're going to be able to build around, I guess, pretty easily, because by sacking the fetch land and getting another land, the Reclaimer becomes a 3/4. Double black, Animate Dead. We will fetch in response here. The nice thing about Bojuka Bog is that it also gets rid of the Faithless Looting flashback. Get rid of the basic. Get the Bog. Bog them. A land here would be fantastic. We find another knight, so I think here we're just going to hold up, find flagstones, and then start developing from there. They might also have their own Surveil land. No. Let's get flagstones. It's pretty nice. So here we have some options. I actually don't mind. Probably playing a knight here, which means I should have attacked. Yeah, I did pause there to see if I wanted to attack or play the knight. And honestly, I should have done that in main phase 1. And that is just a weakness of my play. Something I do a fair amount of is kind of talk through the line, do something, but then actually talk myself out of it. So here I'm actually just going to pass. Hold up Veil, hold up, try to get Marit into play. I think what I should have done there is not fetched, because I probably wanted to go and get Stage off the Flagstones and then fetch for Lush. But that's fine. Let's go Forest. Sack this. Go and get Savannah. And then go and get Thespian Stage. And then if we draw a land here, we're looking pretty good. We don't, but that's fine. I think now I'm just happy to play the Knight. Then we hold up Veil and also Path. Knight being an 8/8 as well is pretty much her own little Marit. Alright, so they do have 4 cards. Unmask. Unmask me. We will Veil in response. 2 cards left. So we want 2 mana. So we get to attack here with the Reclaimer. I guess 2 mana, 2 mana. I could just attack with a Knight and then I hold up Reclaimer, but also hold up these. But if I need to play these, I can't hold up the 2020 as well. So I think we will just attack with the Reclaimer and then hold up Veil Path and also make Marit. Blue. Maybe it's a show and tell? Okay. The question is, do I want to respond with making Marit? Is there a world where I want Karakas? Like, is there a world where they have a creature I actually have to respond to? I don't think so. Because we have the Veil and the Path, surely. So I think we just say okay and put in the Knight. Archon of Cruelty, that's fine. We actually just get to play Veil here in response to the ETB. Which is pretty brutal, yeah. Really nice. So, really nice for us just to have our cards line up. It sometimes happens. It happened here. I feel like we have enough against Reanimator to feel pretty strong. Like drawing both Veils as well just naturally was pretty great. But I think as well there were some sequencing issues, like obviously not attacking that turn with the Reclaimer. Yeah, a few things we could go back on. Maybe even the hands we could talk about more. But happy to come back to 2-2 and play out this for hopefully a 3-2 finish. Definitely learning some things about Green-White as well. I feel like the engine is just missing a little bit. Like there is no, Stoneforge Mystic package. There's no Saga package. There's no... Depths is fine, but I feel like you can't rely on Depths as much as other Depths decks because you only have one copy of it. So if you're going for it, you're kind of going for it probably in your opponent's turn when it's not open to, much removal. But we'll talk about that at the end of this league as well. Hey team, welcome back from round 5. Thank you all for watching. Really appreciate you, and hopefully doing okay. I would say this is a mull to 5 in some ways, maybe a mull to 6 with the Dryad Arbor, but I'm pretty happy to keep this. Question is turn 1 Reclaimer or turn 1 Mum? There's a few things here that line up. I kind of like the idea of turn 1 Mum, just because it really pushes your opponent to have some sort of turn 1 removal, especially in a format with Orcish Bowmasters. And if I'm playing the Reclaimer turn 1 and untaps, I'm probably not playing another spell turn 2. I'm probably just holding up Reclaimer, so I like how this kind of allows me to play out a little bit. All right. So we're most likely going to be a Death Shadow, or sorry, Scam deck here. One thing to note about the Undercity Sewers is I've been seeing a lot of lines where it's blue fetch, end step, sewers, like put like a brainstorm or something in the bin and then untap and then like Lotus Petal, and it's actually been Tess and not Scam, and that can be really hard to try to line up against. Now this is an interesting one. I think here I just like double spelling, probably with Reclaimer first to play around days, and then the second mum. And I think with this board of double mum, I'm less unhappy to see something like a Grief take this swords. The best target for swords here is probably going to be the Troll, as it's a lot harder to block, but we'll see how that lines up. But yeah, Reclaimer into Mav has been really cool, and I think does fit this shell quite well, especially if you are playing the Dark Depths package. Wow, just a pass. Okay. Savannah. So I don't mind playing out Dryad Arbor here just to sack it for stage, and then we hold up depths the following turn. We also get to play Dryad Arbor here and hold up Sword around days. I don't want to put out the Dark Depths just yet. I don't want to expose it to a Wasteland. Entomb. Okay. So thankfully here as well, we do have Bojuka Bog online. So if they are going for, say, Archon of Cruelty, which we see, we do have a nice way around that. Typically Archon just a 1-of in the deck as well, which lines up really well for us. I generally feel okay on Green-White decks against the Scam decks, especially if you do have the Dark Depths. All right, so they're going for Reanimate. We can get rid of the Dryad Arbor. And then go and get Bojuka Bog. And target them. Now I'd love to see a threat. Even a Green Suns. That's pretty decent. Again, I don't want to show the Dark Depths because we are going to go for staged instant speed. So I kind of like end step stage, untap Dark Depths, and then probably just have it. Just make it right there and then play around Wasteland. There is a world where I could be chipping in with, say, 1 mum, holding 1 back, but pretty happy with how this game's progressing. One thing to note as well is that I will get rid of the Bojuka Bog because once it's in the bin, we can then endurance ourselves if we really want to. I don't see a world in this matchup where it happens because we just have endurance to obviously hit their graveyard, but we can obviously bog into the graveyard, endurance it back into the deck for then Reclaimer to find again. So it's always nice just to keep those sort of lines open as well. Go and get that stage. Untap. Play the Dark Depths. Probably happy to attack here with Reclaimer. And then upkeep make the 20/20. So thankfully here, Mum can target itself and give pro black, I believe. Yes. Luckily, what we have here as well is just Endurance Pitch the Reclaimer. Sorry, the Knight of the Reliquary. If they do try to get the Harvester back, if we do really care about it. I assume not. There is a world where we don't, because they'll use all their mana here to get back the Harvester, but you never know. Oh, I didn't make it, did I? Oh no. I didn't make the 20/20 and I should have. I was talking too much. Apologies. I was too locked on this. But that's all good. We'll play this we'll play this out. All right, they're on 4 cards. And honestly, here, I'm happy just to play the Endurance. If they want to Wasteland right now, yeah, I think that's fine. They might think there's more copies with the Reclaimer and then, you know, hold back the Wasteland. Force. Maybe we can find our own Wasteland. No. So they have 2 cards left. In this case, I'm happy to play out the Knight. Holding up Sword. And probably attacking for 4 here. Animate dead. So we do get to Swords this before. We could also just get Karakas with Knight, so there's a few things here, but I think I'd rather... Yeah, it's tough, because if they find a way to get back the Harvester... makes things a little bit tricky. And that's what Swords answers, so... The downside of like allowing them to look at the top 7 is they find a Force of Will to then protect with the Swords. So I think in that case we are just going to Swords this. Because there's no like, maybe I'll lose the Knight this turn. They do find another Wasteland, but thankfully with Knight here we're looking okay. But they do find an Animate dead. But yeah, I think not making the token upkeep was probably the big issue here. Yeah, tough. Really tough. The Veils and the Parts I like. Ouphe, I can easily take out. The Liberator, I don't mind having as a one of. Tracker and Ramunap are a little bit too slow. The Mums, I don't mind. Choke's interesting, but probably not where I want to be. One surgical makes me okay with things. A pretty land heavy hand. I'm happy to mulligan that. I don't want to go down further, so I'm happy to keep this bottom one Wasteland. And then start with the once. I'll take the Thalia. Can 6 here. I think you're out of like stage. So we are 2-2. But yeah, pretty massive to lose out on that game one. Force. Okay. I'm not going to attack here. A little lane that we don't get to Wasteland and hold up Veil next turn, or even like Wasteland and also Green Suns, but that's fine. There's a world where I could use the stage to copy the Flagstones, and then off the Flagstones legendary rule get a Savannah. But we have a lot of draws into green sources. I think here we just pass back with sword open, most likely on the Void Walker. Nice. I think here I'm actually happy to hold up the Veils. Also pretty happy to use her ability to protect from this. Happy just to Veil here to cycle. I'm actually happy just to copy the forest here. Just have 2 green sources next turn. Also plays around Wasteland pretty well. Put that in the graveyard. Play the Ooze. They have nothing interesting. We do now need to find a removal spell pretty quickly. Maybe there's a world where I was supposed to just cycle the Veil. Can get Dryad Arbor here and double block the Harvester. I will also grow this. Gain the life. tough. That's going to be it. I don't think we have a way out of that. Really tough. A 2-3. Even a 3-2 doesn't feel great, but a 2-3 is really tough. But let's go back to the list. Quickly switch this up to card view. Make these smaller. And then I think what I really missed tonight was extra removal on top of just the 4 swords. Like the paths in the board are fine, but you have to draw them. So potentially going up to like 3 path, maybe something like Dismember as well in the main deck would be cool. But yeah, I think just missing some sort of engine, a little bit too fair. A lot of the interaction in this deck is 1-for-1, so Wasteland, swords, things like that. Even Outland Liberator. So potentially something like a Knight of Autumn in the deck would be nice as the Force of Vigor number 3. Didn't play against too many Bowmaster decks, or if they played Bowmaster, didn't really play against that specific card. The depths was fine. I think in that, obviously, 3rd game, it could have been pretty easy to win that 1st game with depths. But maybe Saga is where the value is. I think that potentially, yeah, looking at a Saga build where we take out probably the depths in the stage and add in 2 Sagas, and then look at things like, I think Shadow Spear is a great piece. I think Soul Guide Lantern is pretty good right now as well. I think looking at a Stone Forge with Saga plan could potentially work. They work pretty well together. But yeah, I think I did learn tonight that more removal is pretty necessary. The endurances are fine against Delver, but you really want to have that interaction to get rid of cards. The Lush did come up as a tap source once where we couldn't actually cast a spell on that turn, but otherwise, I don't mind it. It does make the top of the deck a little bit more live. I do like Sylvan Library, but in this version, without a way to deal with Orcish Bowmaster effectively, Swordsing an Orc is just going to be, terrible against the decks where they're playing Orc when they have bigger threats that you want to be Swordsing. So I think if you run Library, you're probably going to be a Punishing Fire or an Orc deck. So I don't mind the thought of Tracker, but I just get the feeling that potentially, although Tracker on paper seems cool, in the metagame, it's just a bit too slow. And by the time you have Tracker online, you're probably drawing into cards that you don't have the time to then cast, which is pretty tough. But yeah, even a threat that isn't reliant on the graveyard would be nice. Like, there's not too many Planeswalkers running around, so Questing Beast isn't as appealing, but something similar would have been pretty cool. But yeah, really keen to look at building this out. Obviously, Clips for Life also has a very sweet build that they've been running for a long time now, so potentially taking some inspiration from that. But it was nice to check out Green-White without any kind of bells and whistles. Like Tireless Tracker, I say, would be the bells and whistles in this list. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward alongside the depth stage plan. But yeah, very cool to play to just get sequencing again a little bit correct. And even little things like I did miss Ramunap tonight. Sorry, I did miss Renegade Rallia over Ramunap. There weren't too many times where I thought, Ramunap for the sort of Wasteland lock was going to be a reality. So I think, a few things to look at, but we'll be back. Hope you enjoyed this. I'll catch you soon.